Good morning. This is Deb, I'm a professional home educator, and we are here talking about managing and resourcing for families of struggling learners. Now, I know that's a mouthful, but it's what it is, and I'm excited about it because Lisa is with True North Homeschool Academy. Y'all consult, don't y'all?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, they consult with special needs and they have classes online, and she's a new friend. We just I guess we stumbled on each other somehow.
Yeah.
And we have our mutual friend Cindy LaJoy, who y'all know is like one of my top favorite people on the planet. And so Lisa said
we gotta get
to
you a new
me,
set of friends there, Devin.
no, I don't. So I said, Lisa said to me, hey, I'll ask Cindy LaJoy if you don't mind too. And I was like, oh, well, no, I don't mind at all, because she always does good stuff for us. And she's with Blue Collar Homeschool. And I know y'all know I'm a fan of Blue Collar. And she's actually going to do our retreat whenever we get our live retreat. And she's probably going to do the virtual one too. And I might even swing Lisa in on that too, because I think special needs is one area that we lack resources in homeschooling. I don't think that we exactly lack. I think it's hard to find. I think that's how I feel, because when I go, it's kind of hard to find. Maybe it's better now than when I started. What do y'all think?
No.
Well,
It's hard. Well,
10% of public school kids are diagnosed with special needs. 30% of homeschoolers are diagnosed with special needs. My thought about that is that every special needs kid is their own type of special needs, and there's no way a big government school system can help or manage in a way that's super effective. And if we bring our kids home with special needs, we have so much more investment and we're willing to do the hard work. And it's like not 1 on 30, it's 1 on 1, right? But with that, it's really hard to find resources. And honestly, I'll be honest, there's not a ton of really great resources out there for the homeschool world. We offer small group live online classes. We're one of 2 companies, I think, in the world that offer small group live online special needs classes. And we have multiple teachers that teach. I mean, you can find tutoring. Tutoring's expensive. And I'm not saying our live online classes are cheap, because we have to pay the teachers and we have overhead and all that kind of stuff. But it's very difficult to find resources. I mean, there's lots of books if you know how to wade through them. But as far as like, yeah, and I'll let Cindy weigh in because she has more experience in this than I do probably. But that's
I agree. The homeschool market really doesn't have any targeted. I mean, Lisa, you're one of the first that I come across, and I've been at this a dozen years now. What you end up doing is adapting classroom materials. Yeah. If you even have a diagnosis for your child, if you've even figured out really what it is, if you can afford to get the testing done, because of course the testing to figure out some of these is incredibly expensive, in the thousands of dollars. And a lot of homeschoolers that have kids with special needs have come out of the public school system and maybe have a diagnosis, and it's not working anymore in the classroom because it's just too difficult to work with some of these things. And so the available resources often are in teacherese, public school language, that isn't necessarily the best environment or helpful to work one-on-one with things. And so there are some resources out there, but you really do have to dig. And I've done my fair share of digging with the number of special needs that we have in my house. I've probably checked out just about everything on the list. As I was making a little list this morning of the various different types of learning disabilities, I thought, yep. Unfortunately, but
Yeah. That's the hashtag funny not funny, right? Like that's one of my I just use that in general now.
You gain that knowledge, but it's not fun how you got there, But I have found a few places to get some resources. And then we adapted, we ended up buying so much curriculum and donating it afterwards. Part of the problem is special needs families end up spending way more to try to find the things that work. And often your kids are years behind, and you can't continue to waste more time trying to see if you can make it work for the whole school year, because you've already lost. Some kids are 3 or 4 or 5 years behind. That's not uncommon, is it, Lisa?
No, not at all.
Unfortunately.
We do offer special needs academic advising, and that includes a 1-hour Zoom. We do provide a test. It's a performance series test. It's not an educational evaluation by a psychologist, and it's not a psych eval. That's the terminology. You're not evaluating your kids for how mentally fit they are, but it's just the term. But it has to be done usually by a PhD, and that's what Cindy's talking about, the hundreds or thousands of dollars. Scottish Rite does do it, but for an affordable option, we do offer special needs academic advising, and actually Cindy's just coming on board with that. And so with that, we talk to the parents and we try to really evaluate what have the kids done, what have they not done, where are they going to go at the end of their high school career? Because most of us, our goal is to launch our kids successfully as adults that are functioning and happy and secure and loved and loving. Right. I mean,
and another part, Lisa, that I think that's a really important point too, is that when we're through True North, when we're looking at kids, we're not looking at, although we may be talking about, we're not looking at them as that's that special need kid.
Right. Exactly.
It's important to find, as we're doing some of these academic assessments with people, is what are their gifts? What are their strengths? Where are their weaknesses too? Because you can't ignore those, and you need to work with them. But, where are positives that can then be worked with? And what are areas that you stop beating your head against the wall with? And sometimes I think parents just need permission to say, you've done enough. It ain't going to work. Just stop. Because you're creating more of a problem with relationship than you are ever going to be able to solve it. Some things really just aren't ever going to be, quote unquote, fixed.
Right.
You can't fix a learning disability. You learn how to accommodate. And I think parents often want to try and fix it first. And some things can be remediated and improved significantly. I'm not saying that. But sometimes you get to a point where you've maxed out. And I think sometimes having another person look at all that you've got for your child and everything that you've tried and throw it out there, and it's permission giving to say, okay, you guys can rest now. You've done enough. This is as good as it's going to get. Now let's see where we can strengthen other areas. I think academic advising for special needs families comes in strongly for all kinds of reasons, and not just because here's a direction and here's a textbook you can use.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I love talking to Cindy, because she, if you want a resource person for kids who are struggling, and I don't really love the term special needs, that we use it.
I don't either. It's the common one.
Well, it's because we have to SEO stuff. I mean, really, it's all about it. That's it. But I prefer struggling learners, because I would say way more of our kids are struggling learners than that have a diagnosis. I mean, everybody has to. It's like nobody thinks they're a picky eater till they go to somebody else's house to eat their food. Do you know what I mean? And that's a good point. That's kind of how all kids are, is that they all have areas where they're really great, and then they have areas that they're just like, just shoot me. I don't want to do this again. It's not
my brain doesn't work this way very well. And that's every learner usually has a subject they're not as good at.
Yeah, exactly. So it's resourcing the parents and it's resourcing the kids, because we want our kids to develop independence, and we want to develop that sense of, this isn't working. How can I resource myself? Especially if your kids have doubly gifted and they have a disparity between their abilities and disabilities, or they have learning disabilities, bona fide learning disabilities, and their brains don't have the hardwiring, they're not going to get to a certain place with it. So we want to resource our kids. We want to help them figure out, like, wow, this is not going to work for me. I don't get it. I don't know what to do. We want to say to them, what's one thing you recognize? Start there and build up. It's that executive functioning we're really trying to help the kids with, because not everybody's going to be a rocket scientist, and that's really okay.
Well, the world doesn't need billions of rocket scientists, Yeah, exactly. Another thing I'd like to point out is people forget that special needs, the term special needs, typically includes giftedness. And that often gets overlooked too. And I'll tell you, you put a gifted kid in a standard traditional classroom and you're going to have problems if they last too long. And And it's a totally different type of special need. And then, as Lisa mentioned, then you have the twice exceptional kids who are usually very bright, and yet there's one area that just doesn't work. And in some cases, that's almost more frustrating because they see their ability to excel in all kinds of ways and go, why does this not work? And those of us that have kids that are twice exceptional understand the frustration is kind of different. And it's puzzling to the person who's struggling in that way, in a totally unique way. But giftedness gets overlooked too. And if you don't meet the needs of a gifted child, you're going to have problems sometimes behaviorally that didn't have to exist at all, just because boredom sets in and frustration sets in. And, sometimes it's really hard for, even in a classroom, I'm not going to say that for a parent, for everybody to meet the needs of a particularly gifted kid. Because they're in a classroom setting, they're shoved into the norm, and what can you do? You can only do so much to accelerate. And it's not about, people think giftedness is about moving through grade levels faster. Yes, it can be that, but that's not really what it is. Giftedness is also really about finding those particular areas of strength, and then plugging a lot of resources in that direction, and a lot of new ideas and a lot of outside the box learning. And some of us aren't that creative at coming up with those things. That can be really hard. It sounds easy because you think, oh, they'll go through math 2 years in one. No, that's not really resourcing a kid who's gifted.
Right. And the thing with gifted kids is that they might have intellectual ability. They don't have the emotional ability that is side by side. And they might be able to churn through 2 or 3 math programs in a year, but they might not be able to manage their own emotions or, and so there's that to think about too.
And often those kids end up in classes with kids that are 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years older than them, not just the exceptions, but maybe a kid is really, let's use math as an example, really exceptionally gifted at math. You don't necessarily want a 10-year-old in with 16-year-olds.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't, because they are not developmentally ready for the kinds of conversations are going to be around. And so I just wanted to point that out because I think often special needs in the gifted category is ignored because we're looking at all the areas of struggle. And gifted kids struggle a lot. They struggle emotionally to fit in where their intellectual capacity is, because they really can't. They aren't really teenagers before they're teenagers. They're not really in their 20s, although they may be able to perform at that level. And so I think that's one thing that needs to be looked at sometimes. And that you don't really find gifted curriculum. You really then find ways to push a kid in project-based learning and all kinds of different things. But finding resources for various learning disabilities, you end up looking at school websites often, school supply websites and things like that.
I just want to back up just a minute, because I think a lot of one of the questions we get is, what do we do after we find out that we have a diagnosis, be that special needs or learning disability or gifted? What do we do next? And I just want to give all the permission to the parents that it's okay to just grieve and let go of expectations if you get a diagnosis. And I think a lot of times as parents, we feel like it's our fault, or we didn't do enough, or we didn't drink milk in the second trimester, or all these things that we burden ourselves with. And the reality is God's in control, and God knows you, and God knows your family, and God knows your kid and loves that child. And so there's not mistakes. All of our families get put together in all sorts of different ways. Probably not the way we got it. Yeah. I mean, we all have our own stories about how our family got put together, and it's probably not what we thought it would be like when we started out, right? And so,
Lisa, that's such a good point. I remember, so we have 3 kids with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, amongst all kinds of other disabilities. All 5 of our kids are adopted from orphanages overseas. And I remember our son, Kenny, who is now 21, the grieving that hit when, oftentimes what happens is you get a kid who has this little thing, and you're starting to see something's wrong, and then this thing, and then it starts snowballing as the grade level moves up and the inability becomes sharper in focus. And we had no history, we had no idea what was going on, and then we also had English language learning, so it took 2 or 3 years to start sorting out something was pretty seriously wrong. And I remember we figured out, because it took us a little over a year to wait to get into the clinic and we had to go from Colorado to the University of Washington to get a diagnosis. Because kids who are older with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder are often not diagnosed. And when we had it figured out, but we're waiting, it just hit me. And it's really true. He'll never live 100% alone.
Right.
He can't. He can do a ton of things. Don't get me wrong. This is a kid that would not present to you initially as not having the capacity to do the things that he really can't do. But the grieving that came at 15, and for him as well, needed to be processed. It needed to be felt in order to move to the other side to become more positive. You don't have to be Pollyanna the minute you get the diagnosis. And I think that's really important. Your kids have lost something, and you have lost something in the dreams for them.
Right.
And we all want to act like we're totally accepting. You know what? Of course, we're going to suffer and struggle a little bit when you learn your kid's not going to live independently or is never going to be able to live into the dream that they had maybe for their future. Like Kenny has struggled a lot with the thought that maybe I can't actually handle being a dad someday.
Oh.
And that has hit him.
Big.
Yeah, that's big.
Huge.
And it's also possibly realistic understanding of his future, that he may not have the capacity. If you can't remember to turn the stove off on a regular basis, you probably would struggle to parent really well. And that awareness for him, depending on if he gets a partner in life that's different, that's a big loss. And those aren't overly negative. Sometimes the reality is really hard for some parents. Some parents are parenting kids who are truly deeply disabled, and their lives as the parent, they'll always have them. Those things really do need to be grieved, and that process shouldn't ever be passed over, because you do important work then.
I love what you said about letting your kid grieve too. One of our kiddos, we said, we think you have ADD, which
she'll be back.
She'll be back.
It happens.
I think that, but she's pointing out something, and I'll be interested to hear what she says when she comes back on. But our kids do grieve.
As the ADD person, that's me. I'll give y'all some background I don't normally give people. I was diagnosed with learning disabilities. I was premature, diagnosed with learning disabilities, went to the typical learning disabilities class. We're talking. We're waiting for you to catch up, but I'm talking. It is.
I'm sorry.
That happens.
It's tough.
It is. It's a weird way, because I have a different. I guess I have a view, because I lived through the special needs classrooms. And knowing something was not right. But I don't think my diagnoses were ever correct until I was an adult. And even now, I think I'm almost 100% sure I have dyscalculia and was never diagnosed for it. But ADD.
That's like a newer diagnosis.
It's a newer. They just kind of lapped it into. It's called a math LD, is what
a math problem. Yeah.
And now I'm like, I'm really sure that's what I fit when I read it. The first time I read a list of everything, I sent it to my mom and laughing, going, "Read this list." But I remember being on that side. So anyway, so we're gonna go back to what Lisa's saying. That it's important for them to grieve.
Yeah. And I just think, even if it seems common, like now ADD, ADHD, everybody hears those terms. But when you read the lists, or your teenager reads the lists, it can be really shocking to them. Like ADD is like, you have an immature brain. You might be immature. Well, no teenager wants to hear that. You know what I mean? And
they don't want to hear that.
Yeah. But I do think we need to give our kids space to grieve. And that can be really hard when you're grieving at the same time. My husband and I have been married 34 years, and our rule is we take turns being upset about stuff. Because when we're both upset at the same time, that's
It doesn't
when the
work so well.
spark
It doesn't go well.
You're in fights for stupid stuff. You just have to give each other space and time to, and if you can't handle it, and your kiddo's doing something, bring in your husband or your spouse or your mom or your grandma, grandparents are golden if they are supportive, right? Find a support group somewhere, somehow, online if you can't find one locally, and resource yourself with people who speak that language. Because here's the deal. I got a diagnosis last year, not life-threatening, but I cried for like 6 months. And it was a relief, like, oh, thank God, all this stuff for the last 50 years makes sense. And it was also horrific. Like, oh my God, this is it. You know what I mean? And I think that's with a diagnosis of any kind. And it doesn't have to be life-threatening. There's that sense of relief and that sense of, this is it. This is what I have. That's it. And give each other space.
As you were talking, I was thinking about, so my twice exceptional son is gifted and also struggles with dysgraphia, as well as a really slow processing speed. If you have a conversation, what comes out, because of the giftedness piece, it looks like really thought that's happening. And it is, but it's really slow thought. What comes out is usually way brighter than most people in the room. And so then you think the wheels are turning, but then the wheels turn. I have sat for 23 minutes waiting for him to come up with a response.
Wow.
Talk about painful. I looked at the clock just to see how bad it actually was going to be. And even I was shocked. But for him, just having, and this was in about 8th grade, he ended up having the giftedness testing through the school district. We were homeschooling at the same time that they also were trying to evaluate, because the dysgraphia didn't fit the test results and everything else that he was showing. He was reflecting true, real giftedness, and it was like the writing doesn't make any sense. That's one real big hint for people. If the child that presents in front of you is generally one way and one area is really off, something probably really is off. But like you were talking about the relief that you felt. He felt so relieved because I think that when we struggle in an area, and I've seen this with every single one of my kids, and I have diagnoses for each one of my kids, not because I'm a junkie, but because we really have bad backgrounds.
You need to go. Yeah.
The ability to look at yourself as a kid and just say, I'm globally stupid, is what happens when we struggle. When kids struggle, they don't have the discernment to go, I struggle with math, but I really write well. And I read well. The kids don't do that. Kids go, I'm dumb.
Yeah.
And we have fought the dumb label. Parents worry, I think, unnecessarily in some circumstances about a label. They don't want their kid labeled. I get why. But you know what? When you're at home, the label helps you. Where the label comes into a problem is when other people overlay the label over your kid, and then they want to like categorize them and classify them. And that doesn't make sense when you're a home educator, because you're the one who's going to be applying the label appropriately. And you can't work with your child well unless you know what's wrong.
Right.
You just can't.
That sense of naming the problem is real. Naming is an act of freedom. It's
yes,
the first
it is. And they don't see that way.
Yeah. But I tell my kids this, God's first command to Adam was name things. I mean, it's a gift to name things. Yeah. And when we name things, I have a marriage and family therapy degree. When you can name things for a lot of people, it's like, aha. Like,
but you have a place to start.
Yeah. And Devin, just when you saw that list, you laughed because you were going, aha.
I was, diagnosed young, but then I retested as an adult because I was in college, and it was freeing to know exactly and have a name for it instead of this big hunk learning disability. That big hunk, you're like,
it doesn't give enough specificity.
Yeah. But having then you go, oh, I know where I can start. And it was wonderful. The girl I work with, she gave me steps to help me in college, things I did not know before. So
if you have a label, you can look for specific answers.
Yes.
And therapies and, remediation techniques. If you don't have a label, you end up, totally flying blind, and you are the educator. You need to know what's wrong. You're not going to you're not going to abuse the label. Like
Right.
you're
Yeah.
other people do. And I think that we end up forgetting the dynamic with homeschooling is we're the keeper of the information and the user.
And you don't have to share with anybody.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to share with anyone. It just helps you as the parent and the educator to know where to start.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I remember, so we have one son that we adopted at 11 months old, and we knew before we brought him home that he had reactive attachment disorder. It was very clear and obvious, but we had no pre-adoption training for infant attachment disorder. We'd only had for, older child attachment disorder and, the signs to look for, and it's different in a nonverbal child. And I remember we had been home a month with Josh, and I was looking online trying to find, resources. And of course, that was 15 or 16 years ago, 17 years ago. And there wasn't nearly the kind of content available as there is now. It was the internet was in its infancy for public use. And I came across a list that had a checklist for, older child. And the first checklist I'd ever seen for infant attachment disorder. And every single item on the list was checked off. And it was Christmas Eve. We'd been home a month. And I remember, sobbing and yet also feeling tickled that I figured it out, that I was really certain, it was this mixture of emotions that I think often happens at any level with any sort of difference, not even learning disability, with a difference. And, but then I felt like, oh, but I've got a key now. I have a key that's going to unlock something. Now I know what to look for. And now I've got it affirmed. And now it's certain that that's what it is. And then you're off and running. But you can't be off and running if you don't, like you said, Lisa, name it first, because you're shooting blind. You have no idea.
So, Cindy, what are resources you found for parents who don't have thousands of dollars to start narrowing down those definitions? Because
I'll tell you, the best
hard.
resource ever, special needs groups online. I guarantee you, if you can go into a special needs group online, and at the time that I started all this, there weren't any. We're talking pre-Facebook, we're talking even pre-Yahoo groups. I was just at the beginning of those coming out. And we didn't end up having a special needs group. We ended up having an adoption groups from orphanages overseas, where these kids come from the same countries, the same kind of treatment that starts some of the same, particularly emotional issues. You throw out the behaviors in a group or the things that you're noticing, if you can name those things, and some parent will go, oh, that sounds like, that sounds like, and you know what, 90% of the time they're going to be right, because we recognize what's familiar. You can, I have official diagnoses for several of the things my kids have, because we were in the public school system for a while. And then we paid thousands of dollars for some, because I had to have the information. I couldn't educate effectively. But my first line of defense, and usually the people who said, I think it's this, go get this tested, was another parent with a special needs kid. First thing I would do is, if I've got a kid who's tracking as, and I'm going to use the word generically, abnormal, because there is normal development and abnormal development. I don't care how much you want to try and fight and argue over it. There are norms. If your kid is off the norm, that doesn't mean there's something wrong, but it could be. And you want to check it out. And often it is, but there is something concretely wrong. And parents can throw out labels of things that you can start researching and seeing if that fits. You can also, today throw your Google browser up and put in, what you're seeing, and you'll get ideas. And then you can do a process of elimination without spending all the money. Sometimes you need to spend the money. If you've got a kid that, Kenny was global, we have probably spent $7,000 or $8,000 over the years in various testing for things. When he first came home, we did testing that was $2,000 or $3,000 in his native Russian. That was something most people won't deal with, but we needed a baseline for where he's starting at, and we didn't speak Russian. And then we had FAS testing, and we've had, things that were done at Shriners, because he's been treated at Shriners, and that's a resource for families too. Often these kids that have learning disabilities have some physical disabilities. And if you can tap a Shriners, they offer some different types of testing, like ADD
They're a
testing.
great resource.
They are. That's one of the best places to start if you
And a lot of people don't know that Scottish Rite is also part of
Scottish
that.
Rite.
Scottish Rite is an equivalent to, and it's underneath the Masons. So you can do speech and language therapy through Scottish Rite. We never did end up being able to take care of that. Kenny had a cleft lip and a palate, so that got us into Shriners for various things. Shriners also treated my other son's back. He did back surgery through Shriners, but that got us in the door for other types of things that we had. The school district. I know people want to avoid it. They have to serve you.
You're right.
They have to serve you. If your child has a learning disability or a suspected one, you may have to fight. You may have to get an attorney. Sometimes a letter from an attorney is about all you have to pay for to let them know, and then they'll do it. But some school districts are great. Some school districts, and more of them have the hybrid programs, so they're not doing homeschoolers in quite the same way as they used to.
Maybe especially now after this spring.
I think we've come a long way.
Yeah, but I mean, like our both the local school districts to us, we have, the one that's in our town and the one that's neighboring, both of them have hybrid programs now that have come up in the last 10 years. And that means the whole school district is viewing homeschoolers differently. You can get test evaluation. You may have to wait a long time and you have to jump through the hoops. But you know, that's a place to start to get it paid for.
I want to mention a book I ran into last year. It's called Dyslexia Outside the Box by Beth Nash, and we actually did a review on it of it on our blog. And she has some of the best definitions of various types of disabilities that I've seen anywhere in one place. So that book is I actually took several pages of notes because she talks about all sorts of different diagnoses with really simple, straightforward explanations, and it's a great place to start. It's not that expensive, and great resource.
What was the name of it?
It's called Dyslexia Outside the Box by Beth Nash.
I'm gonna make sure we post that today.
Another one that I would offer up too, that offers clean and clear explanations along with tons of articles to resource anything that you come up with, is understood.org. Has the learning disabilities and tons of articles about various aspects of, and the crossover of some. And it's a fabulous resource, spoken in parent language, not even educator or professional language.
And the thing is, sometimes certain diagnoses go along with other ones. I mean, there's some things that do go hand in hand. If you have a kiddo with dysgraphia, you might want to look at ADD. I mean, it might just be something you look at next.
Well, like for example, in some are umbrella diagnoses. So, like fetal alcohol disorder, or often drug addicted babies, you're going to start with something underneath. Like we started with speech issues, we started seeing memory issues, we started seeing processing speed issues. We started seeing things one at a time. And so you start working. That's the problem. Well, sometimes you start working with the individual disability, you're not realizing there's an umbrella. There's a common all of this. And if you figured out 2 or 3 things and you plug those in Google it, often you'll come up with whatever, like the actual trigger or cause of some of these are. And not everything has an umbrella diagnosis. But autism can present as a couple of other things as well underneath. And those things get named first. And then you add it up and go, oh, it's because of
this makes sense. So what about for the mom who has maybe somebody who's already gotten a diagnosis? What would their first step be once they have that label or name it? Okay, Devin, no label, name it. You don't have to call it label has a negative.
I would go to Facebook and I would find groups. That would be my first step.
First thing you would do.
There's no better resource than the human resources for people living the experience right now.
I would too.
Suggestion. Honestly, when you go to a specialist, they may work with it all day, but they aren't living with it. It's one thing to work with a kid, and I don't dismiss specialists. They know their stuff, but they don't know what it's like to live with it every day unless they have it or they have a child with it. It's they can't speak to the grief in an authentic way. They can't speak to the lifelong challenges your child is probably going to go through emotionally around a particular diagnosis, but a mom, she knows.
She knows.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I would agree. And you can,
the specialist can tell you.
yeah, and you can look in Facebook for like autism or, dyscalculia even. I mean, there are specialized groups for a lot of these different types of diagnoses, and
all of them have multiple groups.
Yeah.
You can do
And there's
a generic group, or you could do the specific ones.
And don't forget to check their files. Cindy mentioned her files on Blue Collar Homeschooling, and I'm like, I'm on your site all the time, and I never looked at your files. What am I thinking? So.
And I even put them there.
Just a reminder out to your group and yourself. Hey, we have files.
Yeah, there's files there, believe it or not.
And there's a website.
Yeah. There's a website, which I've even stored more resources on, right? Imagine that. But often those parents can lead you to the places on the internet that are going to have the most helpful resources for you. So, I mean, the parents themselves are a resource, but then they send you to, have you tried this? Check this website, it explains it. Have you tried this? You could buy this textbook here. I have some things to share here, but all of the things that I've usually found from some other parent. Sometimes it's been on my own research for sure. You can go on Amazon and put in whatever the learning disability is, and you're going to get a whole bunch of books.
Yeah.
But you as the parent and as the educator, you are the principal, the standard classroom teacher, the special needs teacher, the therapist.
Yeah.
You cannot, as a homeschooler, outsource most of this. If you have a child with special needs, you are going to have to do the work. Or you're not going to see the results you could see. And you can see enormous results one-on-one, way more than you can in a full classroom. Like really, your special needs kid, if you're really dedicated to helping, can go 10 times further than any public school will ever take them. If you're really involved in and engaged in figuring out the problem and finding the workarounds and doing those therapies every day. Most kids in a public school setting, they get pulled out of the classroom maybe once a week. The amounts of actual therapeutic work or special needs work that happens with a child in the classroom is almost nothing. It's, my child who had no speech therapy until I got him at 8.5 and still had a bilateral cleft, not a single cleft, but both. So teeth were moving in the front. He got 2 30-minute sessions a week.
Wow.
Not enough.
Yeah.
But every day, every hour at the kitchen table, no, let's say that again. Say it again. Try it again. Let's work on articulation. That is all day, every day. You are going to be, if you get a little bit of training and a little bit of knowledge, a far better and more effective therapist than any school will ever be.
Yeah.
There's no making up for the amount of time that you can spend.
Yeah.
I would say too, don't overlook novels as a way to learn. There's some really good novels that I've learned a lot about autism specifically because I've worked with autistic kids a little bit more than other diagnoses, but some of the novels out there are really profound and you get a lot of details that you might not in a diagnostic, paper or whatever. And the other thing I just want to mention is that it is great to do research and resource yourself. You need to, you've got to do it. Find people that you can actually talk to. We just started a membership site at True North, and we have families that have been with us going on their 3rd year. We love them. They love us. We consider ourselves a community, but we've been doing live online interaction with them 3 times a week with the parents. Wow. Like what we know about each other and the resources we're sharing, it is exponentially changed in the last couple of weeks from talking like this. And we are actually starting a special needs parent component in May for the same thing, to do book studies specifically on special needs, to have coffee chats with moms specifically for special needs, and parent equipping specifically for special needs, because that live component, even though it's virtual, it just changes. Yeah.
There's nothing like saying, man, yesterday my kid was reading and they kept stumbling over this word over and over and over again. So what can I do to fix this? To a group of other parents who says, well, have you tried? Have you tried?
Yeah.
I did
Mm.
this.
Yeah.
Have you thought about, I mean, you know, you have your own brain trust when you
Yeah.
have
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
people dealing with similar issues or even related issues. Sometimes what worked for someone else with something that's not the same diagnosis still actually works for your kid. And
Yeah.
you're throwing everything out in the wall to see what sticks.
Yeah.
But we can't, if we don't know enough, we can't generate all those ideas ourselves on our own. And you know what? We aren't built for being alone anyways. We're built for community.
Right.
And
Well, and
special needs is isolating.
yeah, it
Terribly.
is isolating. Yeah. The other thing, as I was talking with one of the other gals who's going to be working with this really particularly, hopefully Cindy's going to have time, and we're waiting on to see how much we can pull her into this too. But one thing I didn't realize or think about now that she said it, I'm like, of course, a lot of parents with special needs have limited time to do things like parent group, to haul everybody to a group or a support group or to leave their kids. They cannot do it. And so, I was thinking, oh, let's do a 2-hour parent equipping like we do for the other stuff on transcripts. And she's like, parents with special needs or medically fragile kids or kids who have executive function, they can't leave them. So we're paring them down to like 45 minutes because it's like even that might be too much. But these are things parents of special needs think about all day long.
And other people
don't even think about it. Yeah. And so I think just being with other parents who are like, I get it. I get it. It's
and
such
where,
a
I have lots of friends who are parents of kids that are medically fragile. In adoption community, of course, we end up with more. And the amount of physical work involved with going to the grocery store is beyond my, I mean, we had a ton, and I got 5 kids. I didn't have any of those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine how exhausting it is to have to drag your kids to other locations all week long for therapies, and then you're home. I need to know these things, but I don't have the energy. I'm exhausted. I can't go to another place. And then what do I do with a child or multiple children? Sometimes families have more than one. There aren't as many families that have one child with special needs. If you've noticed, lots of families have multiples, just like ours do.
Yeah.
And then some families sort of specialize in it, I guess.
It is like it does seem some families who adopt special needs kids, to me, I look at that and go, wow, you are divinely equipped and called, because not everybody could do that. I just
we're nuts. Have you thought about that?
Well, I like to reframe from a therapeutic point of view. Reframing is a useful tool.
Yes, a lot of families like this can say things like that. You can't.
Right.
I have some resources that I have used that I thought I would share a little bit of here. I have this is one of several workbooks that I found that I did find on my own. I'm trying to figure this. This is the camera. This is so we talk about teaching logic, but we're not talking like rhetoric and logic. I'm talking like a child who literally cannot logic their way through their day.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm using the term logic, that's what I'm talking about, is a child who's literally completely illogical, not a child you're trying to develop debate skills in, okay? For example, the kind of lack of logic, and I'm going to give an example from my own life is, and I think Lisa may have heard this one or Devin has at one point, my son who struggles, and I have kids from orphanages don't understand cause and effect in the same way because they're basically in jail. People don't understand that the environment alone limits the learning. When you've never been allowed to turn on a light switch, you don't get to turn on the switch, the light goes on.
Wow.
When you're 8.5 years old and you've never turned on a light switch, you've got some long-term work to do.
Yeah.
So I'm talking a very different type of logic, but lots of kids struggle this way. So this was something that I was specifically looking for. And the author is Susan Howell Brubacher, and she has several workbooks for different types of challenges. She has for word retrieval, which is a struggle for a lot of kids with speech and language, sometimes unspecified, but can't pull the right word out that they want to use, or they use malapropisms a lot, which is using the wrong word in the spot, but it maybe has a similar start to it or end to it, or has a similar sound, but it's not the right word. For example, this workbook has some real targeted stuff, which I thought was great. And she has all these different things. So some of it is about teaching influence, about drawing conclusions. So like a question is, a telephone book is thinner than, a blanket, a pizza, or a mattress? To you and I, simple duh question, right? Do you know that there are tons of people who struggle with these kinds of things? And they don't just struggle to come up with the answer, they struggle with the speed to access the information in their brain.
Oh.
And so you can work with questions that are simple like this to help develop the brain's ability to tap that part of the brain more quickly because you're specifically targeting that type of thing. So this one's like drawing conclusions. This book is filled with tasks. This is another one. So like it gives you a list of items. How are they related? Boxes, cartons, and drawers. Now, our normal brain comes up with the answer to that one instantly, but I can tell you some of these were not easy for my kids. A lot of them were not easy for my kids. People with autism often are very literal. Sometimes they can't take these things that, and do that. And sometimes they can do exceptionally well at it, depending on where their brain is struggling. Things like in order of if your freezer breaks down and stops running, and they give 5 things, call a repairman, your food will thaw, your food will spoil, it will not affect the food, your refrigerator will stop working, and then you label it from 1 to 4 or 0 to 4. These things sound simple, but they really are not for a lot of kids. Obviously, people publish books to help them learn how to do this. This is just one of the fabulous, fabulous workbooks she has. This is not something you find easily by searching. I stumbled upon, somebody mentioned it in a article that was written, that was an academic article. And I went to their website, and there's all these books for sale for anybody who wants to pick them up. She works a lot with apraxia, and she has workbooks for that. She has multiple books around this for cognitive development in lots of different areas. So her website is, Devin, are you gonna have a list afterwards?
I'm working on a list, or you can just give me a list.
This is, her name is Susan Howell Brubacher.
Susan Howell Brubacher. I will look her up and post her link.
And it's like brubacherbooks.com or something. I had it this morning. Another resource that I have, and you need to take this with a grain of salt. So this is a mild traumatic brain injury workbook. Some parents have kids who have had that. People whose kids have had, you don't have to have a car accident to have a brain injury. Brain injuries come from drugs and alcohol as well. And people don't stop to think that way about, like, they would think a TBI is an actual physical injury that occurs from outside to in, but doesn't realize in utero, if your parent has used alcohol, you may very well have a traumatic brain injury that has affected it permanently. This has all kinds of things that are activities and exercises to try and help develop areas of the brain, things like this symbol, like examples of a word search, but it's a symbol search in a pattern to help start working on patterns, mazes. There's also explanations and things in here about things. Some parents are parenting babies with shaken baby syndrome, and the brain has been injured. This sort of walks through, it's a program for regaining cognitive function and overcoming emotional pain that comes along with it. So it's not just a exercise book, it's an explanatory book. It's a grieving book to help you work through some of the pieces. It's a really good resource.
I just interviewed Dr. Cotter, who developed the Right Start Math program, and
I watched that one. I like her.
Oh my gosh, I just thought the world of her before, and I just think even more now. She's an amazing woman. She had a stroke, or what did she have a couple years ago? And she actually has had to retrain her brain a little bit. But a lot of what you're talking about, Cindy, is not just tutoring. I want to just draw a distinction real quick, because a lot of people with learning disabilities, kids, they find tutoring. And what tutoring is going to do is going to get your kid through that workbook or that subject or that class. And then at the end of it, they start afresh for many of these kids. And really finding programs that, like NILD, Institute of Learning Disabilities, National Institute of Learning Disabilities, these kind of workbooks that Cindy's talking about, the classes that we offer, they are coming from an educational therapy point of view. And that is to help the kids develop executive functioning skills so that the next thing they look at that they don't have a clue about, their brain can pick out that one thing and they can build from there. So it's not just about getting them through math for this year.
Yeah.
It's about teaching their brain to scaffold, to understand information in a way that their brain doesn't naturally go to.
Or to improve, like this one is processing speed.
Yeah.
This is great. So you can, just like if you run, you can eventually get better times with running. If you work your brain is a muscle. If you work your brain in certain areas and in certain ways where you struggle, you can see improvement, which then makes getting through the class across the board easier.
Way easier. Yeah.
You know, like what you're talking about is a really good distinction, Lisa. Tutoring helps with the subject.
Yeah.
This is therapy. This changes the brain. And then all the subjects are easier. So, I mean, there's really a big difference. This is stuff that moms can do so easily from home.
Yeah, that's awesome.
$130 or $150 or $200 an hour for somebody to do it.
Yeah.
This is a 3-book program. This is level 2 and 3. This is what I would use for older kids. The other one is for younger kids. This is a processing program, which it's talking about scaffolding, using language webs and altered auditory input to improve comprehension. So if you have someone who struggles with auditory processing disorder or processing speed, which are 2 different issues. This is a book that works really great for this. So, for example, you have, trying to find a list of pictures. You would sit this book down with this is facing you as the therapist, and this is the picture. The kinds of questions that are there are: touch the hat beside the button.
Wow. Okay.
And
that's
so
a cool program.
I'm struggling to get the whole picture in here, but you're getting this.
Yeah.
Touch the button next to the balloon. So you're having a noun and a preposition and a noun beside it next to. Often kids struggle with language that's directional: up, down, left, right, above, below. And their brain, especially if there's 2 of them, can you go to the kitchen? First of all, that's one instruction. Go into the sink and grab the plunger. And while you're at it, bring me the cleaning solution too.
Yeah.
Do you know how many kids can't do that? And you can see how this helps a person start holding on to information, trains the brain to track 1, 2, 3, 4-step instructions, because this graduates that way.
Yeah.
It also trains the brain to take the next and below and start speeding up directionality words. Because this one is like next to, but they have some that are like that they have pictures that are above and below. They start using that language, because for some of us, that's automatic. If I go to the kitchen and someone says, no, the top left cupboard, I'm already here in my brain before I've gotten to the kitchen. Some brains don't do that automatically. In fact, more brains than we think don't do that. So books like this can help with processing speed. It gets ever more complicated. So like at the last level, for example, touch all of the letters in the first column before you touch the letter to the left of the green triangle.
Oh, wow.
You start simpler. The very first ones.
So that one has 3 books in the series.
Yeah, this one is level 1, 2, and 3, and you're just graduating through. And the first one starts this simple: touch the circle, touch the square. They're not giving direction language, and they're not giving color language, and they're not giving much other than a shape. And then you gradually work your way through. Pronounced difference, working through these things, huge difference. This is a book that's available from a website that I think is really good. It's called Super Duper Inc. And Duper, they spell D-U-P-E-R. And it's for speech and language pathologists who often work with these kind of processing issues as well, language-oriented stuff. And there's hundreds of tools that you can use there for all age levels. You can get books like this. They have games that you can play with kids that are younger to start developing some of these skills. People who have kids that come from deprived backgrounds like ours do, and that happens in America in foster care. You don't have to be in an orphanage. You have to be in a sensory deprived environment. Well, we know that lots of kids have nothing done but sit in front of a TV. Many kids who are homeschooled or adopted. There is a much higher percentage I've noticed of adopted kids that are being homeschooled, often because they come with these kind of challenges that don't fit in a classroom very well. They're the kinds of things that happen automatically with an engaged baby and mommy don't always happen for some kids. And it doesn't have to be this environment that looks really deprived for it to have been sensory deprived and relationally deprived, then some of these things don't happen. So so Super Duper Inc. And here, let me show you there's their logo. So if you see it.
Yeah.
And the website is superduperinc.com, I think. If you know someone who has auditory processing disorder and they're older, there are multiple things you can do. You really do need to work with it. It really can be improved, like exponentially improved. And let me explain what auditory processing disorder is. Auditory processing disorder, in a nutshell, is a processing problem. Your hearing tests perfectly fine. Your often hearing tests will be 100% perfect. And yet the kid still says, huh, all the time. The kid still can't pick up more than one-step instructions or two-step instructions. The directionality word thing is an issue. If you give them a list of things to do, they'll hold on to either the first one because they've trained their brain to pay attention and they grab the first one, but they grab the first one and they're working on that and the rest of it goes away. Or they hang on to the last thing that said and all the first stuff is gone. There are kids that often mix up language. They mishear things all the time. This isn't somebody who occasionally does it. This is someone who it's regular and commonplace for you to constantly have to rephrase things because they didn't get it, or they're not hearing it correctly, or it comes out different. They say things differently because it's auditory. It still comes out. The language they're using comes out different. So if you're noticing these weird things, it's something to look at. One of our kids, their brain processes only 40% of what they hear accurately.
Wow.
It's the brain scrambles it. It's sort of like listening to a TV that's and the brain picks up pieces and parts, but not all of it. And even that which it picks up often is off. And so you train the brain to hear things and process the sound that's coming in better and more accurately with really intensive work.
Cindy, can I just interrupt? Because if you can help us out here. Processing disorders can often look like they look like your kid is dumb. And
that is exactly what it is. It's processing disorders look like dumb.
Yeah, and we get calls all the time from moms who are literally crying because they know their kid is smart, but they're just flunking out, or the teacher thinks they're dumb, or they can't get their work done, or they're fighting with their mom. They're just done doing homework.
Or they insist they did it right.
Yeah.
I did exactly what I was told, Mom.
Yeah.
And there gets to be a belligerence because they're so tired of being
They're
wrong.
so frustrated. Yeah. So if you have a compliant child who at a certain point in their life or with a certain subject just becomes belligerent, or I'm done, I'm out, I'm not doing it anymore, that to me is usually an indication of maybe a processing disorder. Because processing disorders are usually really super smart kids who just can't get the stuff out of their brain to the world, or the world stuff doesn't get to their brain correctly. It's an interface issue. It's not an ability issue. And so processing disorders are tricky because they're non-conventional.
And they're often not able to be really specified. You can kind of classify them as globally language. And sometimes you can pinpoint certain areas, but often there's multiple pieces of it, and everybody presents differently with different pieces or threads that are a struggle.
So I just wanted to throw that out there too. The other thing that I hear often from parents that's kind of a key for me, that they might have undiagnosed disabilities or processing, is when parents start talking about their kids' memory. Like just what Cindy was saying, like, okay, so I told them the same thing 3 times and they only caught this little piece. That's like a key thing. If I hear that, I'm like, when's the last time you got a test for this kiddo? Because the thing in the homeschool world is there's this rhetoric that tests are bad and we shouldn't test, and that there's the evil empire. Testing is assessment, and it can be a really useful tool to evaluate, again, back to the naming, where are kids at? What is their ability compared to their performance? Because learning disabilities and processing disorders, there's a huge disparity between ability and performance.
Absolutely.
And that's why the kids get so frustrated, because they know it. and they
Well,
can't.
that's why my son
Oh.
Matt ended up being tested in
Mhm.
the public school system. We were working through a hybrid program because they said the intellectual level of his work is not matching in writing what's coming out. And he's also saying over and over again, and this is another sign, Lisa, that's not what I said. That's
Yeah.
not what I put on paper, but it's what came out on paper.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then when you read it back, he goes, but that's not what I said.
Yeah. And
There's a different type of response when a kid has a learning challenge than
Mhm.
I'm being lazy, or
Yeah.
maybe I actually am kind of dumb and I can't do it. Let's face
Yeah.
it, not everybody's the brightest bulb. We'd love to all think that we have the genius child, and most of us think we do.
Yeah.
But there are people of average intellect, and then there are people of below average intellect, and those are IQ issues.
Mhm.
But there is a difference between the spark you see in an eye
Yeah.
on a child with a learning disability or one with low IQ.
Yeah.
There's a
Exactly.
difference. There's a difference, and a parent tends to have a gut feeling and know. And
Yeah.
often an educator does too. Like, there's something wrong because this kid presents as sharp. And
Mhm.
there is. It's like there's a difference between the dullness and the sharpness in
Yeah.
a person. And then it's a matter of, well, so let's isolate it, nail down what the specific problem is if you can. Sometimes there are threads that are a little hard. The brain is to us as space is. It's
Mhm.
as unknown to us as space is.
Mhm.
We know some. We're getting some landmarks in there.
Yeah.
We're beginning to learn more, but we're a long way from
Yeah.
understanding how the brain really truly functions.
Right.
We can't name it, and anybody would tell you that. But
Mhm.
I know that we're out of time probably here. I wanted to
Oh,
mention
Well,
never,
you're just warming up too. I mean, we
I
can
know
keep
it's
going.
never.
um, one place that I would give as a resource that I give out daily on Blue Collar is a company called Weezer Educational. It's weezereducational.com, and I'm looking at it right now to make sure I got that right. And that's Wieser. They are a retailer of special needs books for
Mm,
struggling learners.
wow.
Um, in fact, their headline is Special Materials for Special Needs. They have a series of textbooks along with everything else that they have. They have tons of stuff to use, not just therapeutic tools. Like the kinds of books I'm showing you here are different. They have a few of these types of things, but what they really have are academic materials for kids who are struggling learners. There's a series of textbooks called AGS,
Mhm.
and the AGS series of textbooks is an adapted high school um, curricula that is written at about a fourth or fifth grade level with high school level content. So therefore, you're not talking down, you're not dumbing the whole thing down to a kid. You're just making it more accessible with language.
Mhm.
If you held up the biology textbook, for example, that they have versus a traditional biology textbook for high school, their biology textbook is like this.
Yeah.
They take out the extraneous, they hit the most important facts of the subject. Your child has taken a true biology course without all the extra flim flam.
Mhm.
In some ways, these books are really good for people who want to give a good core education
Yeah.
and not have their kid lose the meat because of all the details that are included, which a lot of high school textbooks today include far more than they need to. And then the key points are lost. That's
Yeah.
really why a lot of our kids are graduating without knowing anything, but checking the box that they took the class and they got an A in the moment, but they didn't retain a darn thing because there was too much presented.
Yeah.
These textbooks are really good for someone who wants to educate that way, but also really fabulous for kids who have the intellectual ability to work on things, but maybe the language level isn't up there, or you don't want the key points to get lost because there's too much junk thrown in. They're
Mhm.
highly visual. They have pullouts of all the new language words that are there on the side, that are often in younger textbooks. These go all the way to
Yeah.
high school with vocabulary words on the side with the quick brief explanation so they can hang on to even the explanation. Sometimes explanations of vocabulary words are too involved. The briefer, the better to get the point across to what that word means. The teacher's manuals often explain why the learner would struggle, which teacher manuals don't typically do that. This is with the eye to a struggling learner. So it's to the educator thinking common mistakes that are made amongst learning disabled kids are this, this, and this. So you can check with your learner to see if their brain is doing this weird thing, and then you can re-explain it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a very, very good set of curricula. There's usually workbooks. You don't really even need the workbooks to go with it. That's extra work if you want to. You can often find the books on Amazon inexpensively. A lot of schools had them sitting on their shelves, and they didn't use that many of them, but they had to buy a classroom set. So often you can find brand new copies on Amazon or new
wow.
copies. I would suggest, yeah, it is, because these aren't used by all of their classrooms.
Yeah.
They're used by the special needs kids in small settings. So usually they have a special needs class of 4 or 5, but they had to buy a set of 10. And so the other 6 sit on the shelf unused, and then they're not used as much, and they're not used by over and over again kids. So often these are much less expensive and in much better shape. Those are a really, really great starting point. And they have, and I'm going to look this up right now. They have textbooks for every subject. They have chemistry, world history, biology, general science, geometry, government, economics. They have British and American lit separately. They have just a plain exploring literature. Their literature programs also really help because they go back to some of the skills that were missed in like 4th, 5th, 6th grade level. In terms of guiding the student to start thinking more with comprehension in mind. When you get to high school, that's not being guided at all. And if you're a parent and you don't know how to teach at a certain grade level, you need a guide. This guides teaching those skills that were missed at the high school level. And at the traditional high school book, that's done. You've taught all that. You've taught how to infer and how to, this is re-taught again, which I like a lot.
Wow.
They have all the history you need. They also have things that I think are really unique that are helpful for a really struggling learner who's probably trade school bound or less. They have life skills English textbook. Wow. They have math for the world of work, which is a different one. They have they have a physical science book, which often is a little easier science for kids to tackle. There is a fundamental math book that AGS puts out that takes basically through about up to pre-algebra. Wow. And hits those things again hard all the way through the year at a respectful high school level in terms of the way they speak to you. It's not, the problem is you get to a kid who's 12 or 13 or 14 and they have the skills of a 3rd grader. You can't find anything to use for them that doesn't look like it's a baby book. Mm-hmm. No kid who's 15 or 16 who is emotionally 15 or 16 wants to do 3rd grade work. And yet that's the level they're working at. These materials fill that gap. Also, Weiser Educational has tons of other things that are more real life skills. They also have skills for books for math for non-readers. So those who can't read very well at all.
Oh, wow.
They're all visual and pictorial, and maybe a word or two. So those are things you can't find just any place. They have some really unique tools, and their website is chock full for all kinds of subjects. Life skills. I'm trying to think of what else I'm looking as I'm talking to you here. They have career education books. They have, which often kids struggle with if they don't know what they're going into. They have things like teaching you how to work in a grocery store, how to take care of your body. They have from the lowest level up to the highest level, but can't quite do it. Variety of tools to use. So that's a place that I would definitely start to look for resources. What I like about it is often some of these companies produce things for just the lowest level or just the highest level, but not the gamut. And this company has pulled in all of these publishers and has all of these resources available. They also have way more sample pages available to view online than most places do. So you really, if you're going to spend the money, you're really going to know what you get, like 12 or 15 pages and of the teacher's edition and of the workbook, not like 2 pages or the table of contents only, because sometimes that's all you get on a and you sometimes end up spending a little more money because you end up buying things like we talked about that you throw away or you cast off because they don't work. So I think that with the special needs component, having more of a preview is is a big selling plus for me, as I can actually see I'm really getting something that probably would work.
I just wanted to mention for the gifted kids, Royal Fireworks Press
Yeah,
has great programs and curriculum for gifted kids that you are not going to be able to find really anywhere else. And if you ever get an opportunity to hear Michael Clay Thompson at a conference, he is a phenomenal educator, and really puts out a lot of great resources for gifted kids. Yeah. So
I'm writing it for that too.
yeah. So yeah, I have a whole page we didn't even get to, but I'll send you links. So because listeners are probably going, please.
I'm like, so much. Yeah. Yeah, y'all send me that list and I'll get them on the website, because I'll post the links under there. Cindy, remind me what the name of that website you were just talking about, because I think I may have wrote it wrong.
Weiser Educational. It's WIESER, no space, the word educational.com.
Okay, and the books you were just talking about.
Is
that at Weiser?
Yeah. And if you put in AGS.
AGS.
Yes.
I want to make sure I had it.
There is another series there that's called, that people used to know, and I think it's published by the same publisher, but I'm not 100% sure on that, called Pacemaker, which was even lower level at high school. But I've just noticed on their website today that's being phased out. They're not going to make those anymore.
Okay.
So yeah, there's some people who are familiar with those, because they're about the lowest level you can get with real high school content. And it's worth mentioning because people may be able to still find it. They can get them there on their website till they're out, but I bet they can get them used on Amazon too. Yeah. And they are pretty low language level. They're really probably third grade language level. And of course you can't cover a lot of high school topics at a depth, but you still have to do something with these kids, and this still keeps them moving forward learning, and that's important.
I know, that's exciting.
Yeah. So there you go. That's a start.
Well, that's a start. Yes, and I will post these links in the comments. Cindy and Lisa are in the group. You can tag them and they can answer questions if you come back and watch this later. But otherwise, I may even start a watch party this afternoon with this one, because I think everybody ought to watch it. And I know I get these questions all the time. I mean, and that's why I'm going to make you watch it again. Because I do. Special needs is probably one of the most asked things that I get on a weekly basis.
If anybody wants to have, one-on-one time to sit down and talk about your specific child or something, contact Lisa at True North Academy. And I will, I'm going to be one of the advisors, and you can tell you'd like to talk to me, and we'll set up a time to.
Oh yeah. Lisa, give us a little bit of information on True North. What can they expect when they contact you? So, because I do think you're a good resource to have.
Thanks. It's True North Homeschool Academy, by the way. If you just do True North Academy, you'll find a co-op in Florida.
Okay.
Sorry, Lisa.
I want you to know that. So we do offer live online small group classes for special needs. We limit it to 5 kids in a class. We have the special needs academic advising that Cindy is doing through True North right now. And that's an hour of Zoom time with an advisor, and you get a personalized learning plan. You get a ton of resources, and we help you create for your kids curriculum. We give you resources for curriculum, but help you create a transcript for them. We look at where it's going to make sense for them to go after they graduate, and how to get them there in a way that won't drive you or them crazy and you can afford. So those are our goals for special needs academic advising. It's a lot for how much you pay for it. I mean, it's a great resource. And then the small groups classes are math games 1, 2, and 3. And those are basically skill specific for addition and subtraction, multiplication, division, and fractions, decimals, and percents. And then we have phonics 1, 2, and 3, but these are for readers, but it's just really to solidify phonetic understanding and syllabication, and how to read with ease and comprehension. And then after that, we have an organizing your writing class. For kids who need to do high school level writing but can't manage a full class. So it's really based on how to write a 5-paragraph essay. We started a new group of classes called At the Movies this year for our different learners. And we have music at the movies, we have history at the movies, we have literature at the movies, to try to bring in more creative types of learning where they still get a lot of that great discussion and they're still doing some writing and some reading without overwhelming them with content and bearing them with content so that they can just move on for success.
Yeah.
We have a lot of kids who are doing maybe a special needs class and then a mainstream class because they just might have a struggle in this area and they're completely fine in other areas. Yeah, and then we have an orienteering and life skills classes. The orienteering is really about assessing who they are and what their interests are and what would make sense for them as far as career goes. And the life skills class is really about adulting, like how to find an apartment. Does it make sense? Can you afford this? What, all those kind of things with cost of living projects and stuff like that in there. So and we do have Facebook groups like Cindy does for community. We're starting this membership site for parent equipping, really to specifically allow the special needs families and struggling learners families a space to connect with others and get resources and really have some community fellowship in the homeschool world because it's the resources are slimmer than they need to be. So we're trying to expand that.
Yeah.
So.
And just to let everybody know the different things that I have worked with personally one-on-one in my family and very successfully with. So I have 5 kids. 3 of them now are running their own business 100%. They're the ones who are most disabled and they're hiring people with disabilities. We have a pizza and ice cream business and we spent a year training and setting it up. And I am, at this point, I'm completely hands-off. They are doing everything. The only thing we're doing for them is sort of the accounting background pieces because we have an accountant who handles it. But I have worked with dysgraphia, dyscalculia, ADD, ADHD, auditory processing disorder, sensory integration disorder, processing speed issues, giftedness, long-term, short-term memory issues. We had my best friend's son worked with us this summer who is autistic and high-functioning autistic. He's a student at USC. He was our intern for the summer, and he helped us with the business, and he gained a lot of skills and a lot of social skills with that. Executive functioning, and I think that's all I've worked. Oh, reactive attachment disorder.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. Hey,
yeah, I'm sure that there's others, but those are yeah. So all of those are what I have raised and worked with 24/7. So if somebody has, a need for somebody who actually understands what they're experiencing or they're thinking, they're dealing with, contact Lisa at True North Homeschool Academy and, set up something, and I'll be happy to see if I have some experience in something that you're dealing with.
We can give you a coupon code for your listeners too, Devin, for the
academic yay!
And it'll be 10% off, and they can use that for the academic advising or a special needs class.
Yay!
And if they call and want a special needs class and they're not sure where their kiddo would fit, we're happy to just advise them without them having to do the academic advising.
Yeah.
Personally, I think the special needs academic advising is super helpful for people who suspect their kids have, because it will just give them clarity they might not have, and they're not just fumbling around in the dark alone. So it's
like Lisa, we've had 2.
Yeah.
2 or 3, and 2 of them immediately stood out as one probably has a visual processing disorder, and the other one very clearly really is struggling with auditory processing disorder, and neither parent really thought to think in those directions. So we were able to make decisions pretty quickly.
And that's terminology that's not just that everybody would know. I mean, no fault of the parents. No.
Well, sometimes you don't know what you don't know.
You don't know.
And someone else goes, yeah, I deal with that every day. I know exactly what that is. I know that. That's like ding, ding, ding.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'll send you links and a code and
good.
And a list of books and blog posts, because we have several blog posts at TrueNorthHomeschoolAcademy.com about diagnosing credits and transcripts for special needs, which are a little bit different than a traditional transcript. Communication challenges for special needs, spotting a struggling learner, different articles like that might be good resources for people too. So
I like resources, especially when I learn something, because I've talked to a couple of mamas this week that I was like, oh, I need to go mention this to them. I'm going to point this out to them.
Yeah.
And probably tag them in the video.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I say,
Grateful.
hey, come back and watch this.
It's been delightful to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you so much. Okay, mamas, the ones who are watching, we're done for today. We went a little bit longer than usual, huh? And y'all are being quiet. I know they're watching. They're there. I can see them. That's why I love StreamYard. I know y'all are there. But anyway, we're done for the day. Ask your questions if you have any. If you come back and watch this later, both ladies are in the group. You can tag them. They'll answer, your questions, or ask me, and I can point you in what I remember. Other than that, have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.